G'day, I'm Paul. Welcome to Australia's most comprehensive ute test. Today is all about off-road driving. We've assembled pretty much the entire cross-section of dual cab utes in Australia. I'm going to put them through the ringer. I've put together some tests that'll really push them to the limits in terms of their traction control systems and also how they perform off-road. Now, while we do have most of the utes here, there are a couple of exceptions. LD BT-50, they've just launched an update for that. We couldn't get our hands on it, and the new Volkswagen Maric is just around the corner. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this video and see how your favorite ute is going to do, you can use the time codes on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below. But anyway, enough talking, let's get into it. Welcome to our first test. This is a 10% grade, but there's a set of rollers here. What we're going to do is drop the ute onto this on one side, and these rollers basically simulate a very slippery surface. So you can see how hard it is for me to be on there, let alone a dual cab ute. It's going to force traction control systems to work to push all of the torque to the other side of the car that actually has traction, and we'll see which ones actually make it. The second test is the offset mogul. Look, this one's pretty straightforward, but it does put a lot of stress on the cars because there's going to be a situation here where the chassis is under full flex. I'm going to open and close the doors to see whether the chassis is rigid enough for that type of flex situation. Then in addition to that, we're going to have a situation where two wheels are off the ground. The car's going to have to sort out its own four-wheel drive system, use its own traction controls, and try and walk its way through it. And now our final test. If you've seen our medium SUV off-road comparison, you'll know log mountain, but that wasn't going to be hard enough for our dual cab utes. So instead we have gravel mountain. This is a 45% incline. It is covered in this loose gravel and stone. We're going to try and get each of the dual cab utes up here in the most suitable setting, and then as they progress, if they don't make it, I'm going to go harder and harder with the settings, and hopefully they will actually get it to the top. It'll either pass or fail depending on how it performs here, so hopefully it goes well because it is steep.
We're also going to test hill descent controls as well to figure out how quickly the ute descends and whether there is any variability in its descent speed.
Okay, time for our first test, and we're kicking off with the Raptor. I thought we'd go through all of the tests with the Raptor first because in theory this has all of the off-road controls, and if this is able to pass everything, it at least then sets a benchmark for everything else. So with our rollers, they're going to drive driver's side onto it. We're going to have a situation first in two-wheel drive, then in four-wheel drive where we don't have any traction on one wheel, and then in four-wheel drive on two wheels. It's going to force the car to send all of its torque over to the other side to get it moving. So here we go. Pop that in the center there. We're in two-wheel drive at the moment. Come to a full stop, and I'll just roll onto the throttle now so I can feel that wheel spinning. I'm going to gradually apply more throttle. There we go. So it is moving along nicely. That is really cool. I love seeing how all this tech works. There we go. Awesome, very cool. So next up is four-wheel drive. So I'm going to pop this into 4A. Depending on the vehicle, if it has 4A, I'll just go to that. If it doesn't, I'll go to 4H. We just want to simulate what it's like now with both of the drive wheels on the driver's side not having any traction. So we'll do the same thing again. We'll just roll onto our rollers, come to a stop, and I'll just roll onto the throttle now. Just rolling back a touch there. A little bit more throttle. There we go, I can feel it shuffling torque over there. Nice. Awesome, so pass for the Raptor in both two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. Now, next test is our mogul, and I thought I'd point out at this point as well that this is light off-roading. We're not 4x4 24/7, we're going to be thrashing the crap out of these. We're doing what I think most owners are going to be doing and to the limits that they'll be doing it. So yeah, do keep in mind that this is all designed to just test all the systems and not really test what the breaking point of these cars is. So first up, it is the flex test. So I'm going to drop the car into the mogul here to the point where we have two tires without traction. Once we get to that point, which is just there, I'm going to open and close the door to see whether the chassis is rigid enough. If it's not rigid, like we found in our medium SUV test, the door won't open and it will hit metal on metal. Now what I'll do is power on out of this, and by the way, I'm just going to keep these in four-wheel drive as well, so really want to test the traction control systems here and how well they send torque between the axles. Right now we have two wheels with minimum traction. I'm going to roll onto the throttle, and it's now forcing the car to send torque to these two wheels. All sort of bouncing around a little bit there. I'll go harder onto the throttle. I can feel it tilting now. Nice, excellent job. And Raptor is good. It is seriously impressive how well they've done everything here with traction control systems. I'm really, really impressed with that. Okay, it is time for, what do we call it, gravel mountains. So the way this test is going to work, each of our dual cab utes are going to drive up here in what I think is the most appropriate setting. Definitely all will be in low range as well as a minimum, and then we'll see if they can actually make it up there. I thought, you know, if we do Raptor first, if this doesn't make it up, then probably nothing will. So we will see how it goes. I'm going to go into the drive mode that's most suitable, which I think is going to be mud ruts here. I'm going to put them into low range. This automatically locks the rear diff, which is good. Stability control goes off. So we'll see how we go with this. If this doesn't work, I do have another option for Raptor, which is front diff locked. So I guess we will see what happens. I'm going to leave that on so we can see our status screen there. I can see that front camera too. So let's give this a shot and see how we go. All right, clearance feels good. So far, so good. All right, I'm gonna have to back out of that before I dig too much of a hole. A little bit sketchy here because I have no traction at all, so coming back down I'm gonna have to be super careful. Okay, I'm a little bit concerned that if the Raptor can't get up here, I don't know how we're gonna go with everything else. So I'm gonna come back down and I'm gonna try locking the front diff here on the Raptor. So none of the other utes have, actually no, I lied, the Gladiator, because it's the Rubicon, has front diff locks as well. So let's pop that on. So I can lock the front diff by pressing this. Now, this is probably going to be obvious to most people, but yeah, do keep in mind that you don't want to be locking front and rear diffs when you're on sealed surfaces because you might damage the vehicle. So we'll give this one more shot now. Front diff locked. This is the spot where we couldn't get up. Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. So all it took there was front diff to be locked, and I was able to use the same throttle application to get up there. That is absolutely unreal. So it shows you that this four-wheel drive hardware here, specifically for Raptor, actually makes a difference and actually will get you out of some of this terrain. So yeah, I bloody love this. It is such a good setup, and that camera's handy as well because we're about to go back down that with hill descent control, so we'll see how that works. So second part to this test is going to be descent, so using hill descent control. This actually has a feature that allows you to set the speed, and you can use this going forwards and, you can use this for ascents and descents as well. So you push this, you press the set button here with the cruise, and then you can see here that it's allowing you to set the speed. So we'll select 4 k's an hour and we'll just see how that goes. It's going to then drop off the edge and it will manage our descent accordingly. Cannot see a thing over the bonnet there, so that's where this camera comes in handy. Here we go, so that's all set up. Okay, there we go. A little bit quicker here. Yeah, absolute piece of cake. No silly noises inside the car, it's just doing everything on its own at a pace that I'm really comfortable with, and I can fully adjust that pace all the way to 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 kilometers an hour. So yeah, absolutely unreal. So Ford Ranger Raptor, it is an absolute beast. So let's see which other vehicles now will be able to actually make it up there. So time for one of the identical twins, the BT-50. This shares a platform, of course, with the Isuzu D-Max. So let's see how this goes. We're in 2-wheel drive, roll onto the throttle here. We're going back heaps. Wow. That's not great. So we basically rolled all the way back. I hit the grate and then yeah, it is in struggle town here. So yeah, I just don't love the traction control system on Isuzus. I'm going to go straight onto the throttle there, hard as I can. There we go. Okay, we got off it in the end. Yeah, I don't love traction control on Isuzus. I think it is their absolute weakest point, and you can see there, we rolled all the way back and hit the grate. So that is a fail for 2-wheel drive high range. Okay, we'll flick 4-wheel drive high range on. that is now active, so let's line this up. We'll see if this fares any better. So there it is there, we're in the rollers. I'll come to a stop. I'll roll onto the throttle. Oh, it's doing something, I can feel it biting hard there. All right, there we go, we're getting off that. Okay, so four-wheel drive high range, a pass for the BT-50, but failed for two-wheel drive high range. And the Mogul in four-wheel drive high range in BT-50. First we'll do our flex test. Make sure this is all good. It's a new platform, so it should be fine. Here we are there. Yep, no dramas. So let's see if traction control is the Achilles heel once more. I'm gonna roll into the throttle there. A little bit more. Harder. Whoa, there it is. Okay, we got there. Oh, just. So yeah, basically traction control was stopping us from moving right at the start, but once it had a little bit more time, it got settled in and got us over there, but it took a little while to get there. It is really not a very good system. Gravel Mountain, meet BT-50. We'll go into low range, so flick that over to 4L. I'm going to lock the rear diff as well. The good thing about 4L and the rear diff being locked is it switches off stability control and traction control, and hopefully that will mean we don't have any of that annoying traction control stuff intervening. So let's give this a little shot here. So far so good. All right, come on, come on. Come on. No. Bueno. That was just bogging down there and we weren't going to get any further. Unfortunately, it is a fail for the BT-50 for our gravel mountain climb. Now with our descent, I'll switch hill descent control on by pushing this. It then lights up here to say that hill descent control is active. I don't have a front camera, so I kind of just have to look over the edge here. And as far as I can tell, I can't control speed with cruise control switches, so we're just gonna have to see what happens. I'm gonna let go of the brake now. Oh, that is way too quick. Way too quick. I just don't understand why they do this. That is actually really frustrating. It's like, did you actually drive this off-road when you were engineering the car? Because it's just way too fast for that type of hill. You can imagine if that was wet and muddy, the thing would just fly down. I would have no control over the car. So yeah, it's really disappointing all around here with BT-50 in terms of off-road. Musso is up next. So two-wheel drive first, but it is worth noting here that this actually has a automatic locking rear differential. So I don't have any modes here that I can actually manually lock the rear diff. Once it senses a certain rotational slip, it will then lock on its own. So we should see that actually activate here when I roll onto the rollers and things don't go to plan. So there we are there. I'm on the rollers. Brakes are on. Wow. That was weird. My foot was on the brake hard, but it then just started rolling back on its own, which was kind of strange. So, all right, I'll roll onto the throttle here. Oh, there it is there. God, it is a vicious diff lock. It just hits hard. It's like someone's come up and punched you in the back there. So, yeah, it worked, but I didn't love the way that it kind of just rolled back randomly there when I went onto the brakes. So, okay, we have switched into four-wheel drive high range. You can see it activated up the top there. Drive back onto the rollers. Come to a stop. I'll see if it does that thing again. So foot is on the brake now, hard on the brake. Okay, it just stopped normally that time. So I'm gonna roll onto the throttle. There it is again. God, it is such a vicious noise. You'd actually hear it squealing on the outside when it locks the diff there. So look, it is very effective because in both two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, it has no dramas there on the rollers, but yeah, it is just a little bit vicious in terms of the way that it activates. I would have just preferred to have a button that I can set on my own. Mogul time, I'll pop this into four-wheel drive, high range. God, the weather is shocking today. The rain is just on and off. All right, let's see how it goes. I'm suspecting this is gonna do the same thing as it did before, where it just shunts me in the back. So get our flex test set up first, which is just there. It it is catching a little bit there, so the body is fairly flexed. Yeah, so that's our spot there for the flex test. Yeah, so that's metal on metal there. I can hear that catching. So yeah, it is flexing the chassis there. So obviously this is the extended wheelbase version. It does feel like it is under a fair bit of strain there when we do have it fully loaded like we do. But I'm going to roll onto the throttle now. The rear diff will lock. There it is there, and then up we go. So yeah, look, from a performance point of view, that rear diff lock works okay, but you just don't have that reassurance of when it's going to activate. Once it kicks in, it's kind of just a bit random in terms of the way that it comes on. I prefer to just have a button there for it, and it's a shame the chassis isn't as strong as it could be. Okay, gravel mountain. I'm going to put this into low range, flick that over. Hopefully our diff will lock as we're ascending. This has just over 200 mil of ground clearance, so that may actually be the biggest issue in terms of getting up here, so we'll see how that goes. All right, so far so good. I can feel that rear diff is now locked. All right, I'm going to stay in that. Come on. No. That is it. All right, so unfortunately, no go for the Musso there. I think it is probably a mix of ground clearance, tyres, and that sort of on and off again rear diff lock that just isn't helping it get up this kind of terrain. Okie dokie, hill descent control. Activate that by pushing this button just here. We also have a camera here as well, so let's tip it over the edge here. Oh, that is way too fast. That is way too fast. And so noisy, yeah, that is really not a good hill descent control. I had to take over there because that would have destroyed the front end of this car. So yeah, pretty disappointing there that I had no control over the speed and it just sort of ran away on itself there. Okay, great walls. So I've popped this into eco mode, which puts it into rear wheel drive. So we'll line up our tracks here. There we are, just there. We'll come to a stop and I'll roll onto the throttle. We'll see how it goes. Now this does have a rear diff lock. It doesn't have one of those auto locking ones like the SsangYong does. So I should just be able to have the traction control doing all the work here. So I'm on that throttle now. It's going backwards. Okay, I'm gradually applying more and more throttle. Yeah, it looks like I'm now flat to the board, so it looks like the Achilles heel of this is going to probably be the traction control, because it really did struggle there to get us moving, and we did roll back as well. So all right, let's pop this back into just the standard drive mode. Okay, so this is now in all-wheel drive, so let's see how that goes. We'll just line up our rollers and then we come to a stop. And then I'll just roll onto the throttle here. Yeah, it is struggling, so I'm going to go harder on the throttle. Yeah, I think we're going to clip the back end there. Yeah, there you go. So that is a fail for all-wheel drive, because it actually rolled all the way back and clipped the edge of where the rollers start, which kind of gives it momentum to then move. So yeah, look, it was a marginal pass in two-wheel drive, but I think it's a fail there in all-wheel drive if it's going to roll back far enough to do that. Because in theory, if we didn't have that there, it would have just kept rolling backwards. So, and that's in all-wheel drive, which I would have expected it to do much better in. So yeah. So let's see what happens here with the Mogul. We'll line it up, check the door, make sure it is a nice and strong chassis. Okay, here we go. So that's it just there. No dramas, nice and strong. I'll roll onto the throttle now. Oh, it is struggling here, so I'm now flat to the board and we're not getting anywhere. Okay, four-wheel drive overheated there as well. So that is not good. I'm going to have to let this sit just for a minute and we will give this another crack. I may have to just lock the rear diff as well just to get us out of here. Okay, so we've let this sit for a little bit. I'm going to try locking the rear diff now. So we'll just see how that goes. That should get us out of here without any dramas. All right, there it is. A slight little side step. Yes, not very good. The overheat thing wasn't fantastic. So probably worth calling out as well with our mogul test just before that this is the only car I've driven over that I've had to lock the rear diff. So that's why it failed that test. Let's try this. I'm going to go into the proper four-wheel drive low range here. So we'll just wait for that to go through. We're also going to lock the rear diff and we will see how this goes. So there it is there. Yeah, I think the four-wheel drive overheat thing is because this is a permanent four-wheel drive setup or semi-permanent. And that may have caused us grief there, but we'll see how this goes, especially with these tyres on it. Come on. Oh, it's so close. It is so close. Come on, come on. All right, I'm going to stay in that. Come on. No bueno. If we stayed in that, I think they've ended up on our side. So I think it is probably a combination of tyres and just perhaps a lack of sophistication here with the four-wheel drive system. You know, this is a commendable ute for what it is, but yeah, when you get matched with terrain like this, it really does need those years of experience that other manufacturers have with things like traction control and four-wheel drive systems to really be able to climb up that confidently. So yeah, a little disappointing, but hopefully the guys will take this feedback on board, and it's the same with all manufacturers here. Hopefully they will take the feedback on board that we give them with all this sort of stuff and actually develop these systems to work better with the cars in the future. So hill descent, I'm going to pop that on. You can see that flash up the top there. We also have our front camera running, which actually gives you really good visibility over the front end there. So we'll see how this performs, and I'll also see if I can reduce the speed of this as we go. So it doesn't feel like anything I do there on the steering wheel is changing the speeds. We'll see whether it's too quick or slow down here. It's not too bad. The clearance doesn't seem amazing. The numbers are actually not terrible, but I can hear us cracking everything down below there. But in terms of the hill descent control, it's actually maintaining a pretty decent speed there. It didn't fly over the edge. It was quite confident in its descent as well, so I'm happy with that. Silverado time. I'm really interested to see how this goes. So similar story to a couple of the other utes here. This has a self-locking rear differential. So when I roll onto this, it is going to want to activate. So we're on the rollers there, on the brakes, and I'll just roll onto the throttle and see how it goes. There it is. It's like the SsangYong. It just sort of brutally engages. Again, I know I keep saying this, but I just wish there was a button that said rear diff lock so I can just control it myself. So let's go back. We will try four-wheel drive auto now as well. Okay, we are now in four-wheel drive auto, so you can see it up the top there. It will basically select the mode for us, get it onto our rollers, and there we are there. Okay, so I'm going to lightly apply throttle and we'll see how it goes. Again, it's rolled up and then hit that diff lock at the rear, which sort of shunts us and does a mini skid there on the road. So yeah, look, it did its job, and just like the SsangYong, it kind of just pushes away and gets moving. Okay, mogul time. I've got our four-wheel drive display active there, so we can get a good idea of what our all-wheel drive system is doing when it is in that four-wheel drive auto mode. So I can already hear a clunk there. It sounds like that's the side step. We'll get this into our flex condition, which is about there somewhere. It is a bit tricky with these bigger American trucks, but it actually feels fairly rigid there. So roll onto the throttle now, keeping in mind this has that self-locking rear diff. So I'll just wait for that to clunk. There it is. Yeah, look, it's fine. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but yeah, I'd just love to be able to control that myself, I reckon. Hill time. So let me pop this into low range. So there is a button over here that allows me to do that for low. You can see it does the shift, tells you it's doing everything up there. That is now engaged. Tells me stability control is off. I'm also going to put this into off-road mode for the drive mode, so that will help with just getting the torque where we need it to go. And I'll leave that off-road screen running as well so we can see how that fares. This has a ground clearance of just under 240 mils, so we can just see how this goes. This is a big old bus, so if it makes it up here, I will be very surprised. All right, here we go. All right, so far so good. Jeez. Holy crap, it is walking up here. That is amazing. I am genuinely shocked. That is amazing. I was not expecting that. I had to lock the front diff in the Raptor. This with its auto locking rear diff and just in low range managed to get up there. I am genuinely shocked. So yeah, that is sensational. Awesome. All right, let's try go back down and see how that goes. So it is probably worth pointing out as well that this has all terrains fitted to it. So that probably is why it worked a little better getting up there, but that was pretty awesome. Now I can't really see anything over the front of the car there. So I'm going to flick our camera on. Awesome. So it is a pretty decent camera there too. Hill descent control is now on as well. You can see that now active. I've let off the brake. Let's see how it goes down here. Actually doing a really good job. We are pushing a lot of gravel out of the way here. I'm able to adjust the speed using the cruise control switch. I'm genuinely shocked how well this is doing for such a big old thing. Yeah, nice. Can't wait to test the Ram. I'm curious to see if that does as well as this, but this is awesome. This isn't even the off-road version. They do the Trail Boss, which is lifted and has even more aggressive tires. So yeah, genuinely impressed by this. Now, if you are watching this from overseas and you don't know what this is, it is the Nissan Navara Pro 4X Warrior. This was developed in conjunction with Nissan and an Australian engineering firm to basically come up with an off-road focused version of the Navara. So we're in two-wheel drive at the moment. We'll line up with our rollers and let's see how it goes. So there we are. There, we'll come to a stop and I'll roll onto the throttle. I can feel that biting already. Excellent. A little bit more throttle. That's pulling away nicely. So that is traction control doing exactly what it needs to do. Shuffling torque to that side of the car and then pulling us up the hill. So pretty impressive there. All right, let's give this another shot now in four-wheel drive high range. Four-wheel drive high range is active. You can see the light down there. High range four-wheel drive actually splits torque 50% between the front axle and rear axle. It doesn't do any torque splits between the left and right of your axle. So that's why it really does rely on traction control to do the rest of the work for you. So we'll line up with our rollers there, come to a stop, and then I'll roll onto the throttle. God, that is good. No dramas at all there. That is really impressive. So excellent job. Okay, I've got high hopes for this on our off-road course too. Based on that performance there, I'm thinking the Navara should do well here with our offset mogul. So we'll do our door test first. We'll get this into its flex situation. Okay, so it's about just there somewhere. No worries at all. So roll onto the throttle here. We'll see how it goes. Bouncing us around a fair bit. There it is. All right. Job well done. So yeah, look, it bounced us around a little bit there as it tried to get a bit of traction, but we've got a meaty set of tyres on this, and given how well the traction control system performed on our rollers, it kind of just walked through that as well. So let's head to the big hill. All right, we got this. Okay, so hill time. Pop this into neutral. I'm going to go 4 low. We'll lock the rear diff. Yeah, so look, this has kind of been engineered to do exactly this. So I think we should have some success here. So let's give it a shot. You've got stacks of ground clearance, like 260 mil. Oh, I didn't love that. It kind of held that gear for a second, but oh, we are so close. Come on. All right, there it is. We got there. Okay, so look, that was probably a mistake on my part, but it was basically going fine. It then, for some reason, wanted to kick down a gear, and then it just flared heaps. So in theory, I should have just selected the gear manually there, and it probably would have walked up a whole lot easier. But you can see those chunky tires really help it just cruise up that rear diff lock, low range. Actually pretty surprised by how well that performed. Hill descent time, I'm going to pop that on. You can see that's active with that little light down there. Now, another thing worth keeping in mind, this does have a 360 camera. The camera itself is really poor quality, but it does give you at least some indication of where you're about to drop off. I don't have any ability to change the speed here using the cruise controls. So let's just see how it goes in terms of setting its own pace. It's actually doing a really good job. It's nice and slow. It's all sort of coming along really nicely. Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. Yeah, this is very confidence inspiring. And then if I do want a bit more pace, I can lean onto the throttle. And then as I get out of the throttle, it goes back to that slower pace again. So yeah, tell you what, was not expecting this from Navara. It's actually doing a whole lot better than I thought it was. So this is a pretty old platform. There is a new Navara coming. It's going to have a platform shared with the Mitsubishi Triton. But for what they've done here with the engineering work in Australia, it's actually helped it with this type of off-road terrain. The Isuzu D-Max, it shares a platform with the BT-50, and I'm not a betting man, but I suspect it is going to do the same thing that the BT-50 did. So I'm going to set it up here on the rollers. We'll come to a stop, and then I'll roll onto the throttle, and we'll see what it does. Back it goes. That is so not good. So disappointing. I'm just going to have to get stuck into that. Yeah, it's really disappointing. I said that before with the BT-50, but I would have thought, given Isuzu pretty much just builds off-road vehicles, how they don't have traction control systems sorted yet is absolutely beyond me. So, all right, we will switch over to 4 high now. Let's line it up. Okay, we're in the rollers there. We'll come to a stop, and then roll onto the throttle. Same sort of thing again. It is getting some kind of movement though. Come on. All right. Yeah, we got there in the end. So, yeah. 2-wheel drive fail, 4-wheel drive high range pass. Let's see what happens here at the Mogul in the D-Max. I suspect we're going to see the same thing. So we'll do our flex test anyway, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so there it is there. Yeah, no dramas there. And now let's see what happens with the throttle and this traction control. So all right, my goodness, we got there in the end. But yeah, it's just sitting there spinning until the traction control figures out what to do. So all right, let's go to the hill. I keep saying this, but I'm suspecting it's going to do the same thing as the BT-50. Okay, D-Max, our friend, we will go into 4-wheel drive low range, so into neutral, flick the switch over to 4L, wait for the click, engage the rear diff lock, there we go, okay. It switches off all your traction controls and stuff like that, so let's see how it goes. Ah, it's already struggling, we've barely even moved, so. That is so strange. All right, shouldn't even get like even close to where the BT-50 got. A little disappointed with that, I reckon. D-Max fail on our hill and like right at the bottom too. Hill descent control, I've got it on. You can see that little light there. Yeah, like I said in BT-50, no front camera, so I'm just gonna have to keep an eye over this as we cross over. BT-50 went down this way too quickly, so I don't think this is going to have a different enough calibration, and it feels like it's going to run away from us again. Yep. I'm just going to take over braking here. That is ridiculous how fast it goes down here. Yeah, you really, it sort of gets a lot of momentum and then just doesn't slow down. And right near the bottom here, it is just sailing down there, just with no great deal of control. So yeah, look, I think Isuzu just needs to work on the traction control systems and, I mean, stuff like this that is all just software driven. I think the hardware beneath the skin's good, but it's just this software that is really letting it down. We are back to America in the Gladiator. This is the Rubicon. So It's pretty much built for off-road driving. We are in two-wheel drive. Let's see how the traction control system works. So we'll pull it up just there and roll onto the throttle. Good, not very good, then it's rolling back. A little bit harder on the throttle. We're now at full throttle. Okay, we got there in the end, but that wasn't exactly the best performance at all. So, okay, I'll move this over to 4-high auto, so it will now automatically engage the front axle as required. Let's see if this performs any better. Hopefully it does. Okay, so we're on the rollers there, so let's see how this goes. I'll just roll onto that. Rolling on rollers. Oh, that is significantly better. That's cool. This is where Jeep's proper four-wheel drive heritage comes into play, because we barely shifted at all. I think of everything we've tested so far in four-wheel drive, high range is probably one of the best in terms of just hooking up and moving. So yeah, very impressive there. Now let's attack our mogul. The last time we did an off-road test, the Compass had issues with the rigidity of its chassis. We couldn't open and close the door properly. So let's see how it goes here with the Gladiator. This is a long boy as well, so I'll be keen to see how this actually fits into this little hole. There we go. Check that door. Yep, all good, thank goodness. Let's now roll onto the throttle. I'm fairly confident this will be fine, just given how much traction this thing has and how well that traction control system worked. Yeah, no dramas there, so piece of cake. The wheel articulation in this is crazy, and it is worth pointing out at this point as well. This actually has a rear diff lock, a front diff lock, a sway bar disconnect, and the sway bars are basically there to give this better handling on road. You then disconnect them to give this better wheel articulation, because a sway bar will typically limit your wheel articulation when you are off-road. Yeah, it has a host of really cool features. So I'm excited to get to the bottom of the hill and give this a crack to see how it goes. We had to use front diff lock in the Ranger, and I'm wondering whether we have to do the same thing here with Gladiator. So let's match the Raptor. I'm going to go into low range, lock the rear diff, and put this into off-road plus. So neutral, we'll go over and down to low range, put that back into drive, lock the rear diff, hit off-road plus. I love that there's so many buttons here to get a menu there, and I've also got the off-road pages active here as well. Let's see what happens. If we can't get up, I'm then going to go back through this and we'll lock the front diff as well. Oh, that is a really tight low range there as well. All right, here we go, here we go. This is walking up here without any problems at all. That is unreal. That is unreal. I didn't even have to lock the front diff or do the sway bars. You know what? I want to go down there and do that again, just with all that stuff locked, just to see what it feels like. Okay, we're back down here again. So we'll pop this into neutral, back into low range. There it is there. So front and rear diff lock. Disconnect the sway bar. We will go into off-road plus. So it says there, sway bar disconnect in progress. Okay, sway bar is disconnected. Steering is really heavy now as well. So let's see how it goes. All right, here we go. Front diff locked, rear diff locked, sway bar disconnected. And it is absolutely walking up here. This is unreal. Look, I thought the Raptor was pretty cool, but this is just next level stuff. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so hill descent control, you activate it by pushing this button, and it comes up with a message there saying, select speed on, use shifter to adjust speed, and you can see the speed in that top corner there. I'll also increase our speed a little bit. It's a really weird hill descent control because it's coming to a full stop. If I roll out of the throttle now, it's basically coming to a full stop. Let me try and increase the speed on that to like 6 k's an hour. Oh, that's better. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's actually much better. So yeah, bloody impressive hill descent control and just impressive off-road altogether. This thing is an absolute beast. I wasn't expecting it to be this capable off-road. Let's continue the American theme with the Ram 1500. So Unlike the Silverado, this doesn't have a locking rear differential. Instead, this has a limited slip diff, so it's going to get to the point where it does actually have slip before it actually does anything. So I've left all of those traction aids on. We're in two-wheel drive. I'll just roll onto the throttle and we'll see what happens. It's rolling back a little bit there. Stay in that. Okay, we're finally getting a bit of progression, more throttle. Yeah, nice. Okay, so it just took a little bit of incentive there. I didn't love the fact that it rolled back, but also we didn't get that big shunt that we got in the Silverado when the rear diff engaged. So the limited slip differential feels like it might be the better solution. Okay, time to test four-wheel drive auto. So I'll hit that button, wait for that to engage. There it is there. So same story again. We'll line up the wheels and see how it goes. So there we go, we've stopped there, roll onto the throttle. Oh, that's much more confident. That gets along really nicely there with no fuss and no back shunt like in the Silverado. Okay, moguls, let's see how we go. Oh, by the way, this has side steps that come out when you open the door. Because I'm going to be opening the door while we're in the ruts, I've pressed this button here that basically stores them so they don't pop out when you open the door, FYI. So four-wheel drive auto, we'll drop this sucker in, and then we'll see how we go with our chassis rigidity. So there it is, just, whoops, one bit further, just there. Yeah, no dramas, that is all good. So I'm going to throttle on out of here and we'll see how we go. So with that limited slip diff, it's going to have to work here. There we go. Get us out. Nice. Piece of cake. These American trucks are seriously bloody good. Okay, let's go to our steep hill and see what happens there. Now, this has slightly less ground clearance than the Silverado, both at the front and rear axles, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I'm going to put that into full drive low range, full drive shift in progress. Okay, it's switched all that stuff off. I don't have any buttons here for an off-road mode, so I guess we just have to see how it all goes. Keep in mind, like, TRX is the off-road king, so I'll be curious to see what happens here. So let's give this a shot. We'll mosey on up. We are on highway terrain tyres too, so it's going to be pretty tricky for this to make the most of that situation. Oh, wow. Oh man, that is unreal. It's almost like this course just isn't even hard enough. I know I mentioned it was a light off-road course, but I just am genuinely shocked how well this is able to climb up there on highway terrain tyres. I don't know if it's just the torque that it's got, but it is just very confident climbing and no dramas at all. So one thing I noticed there, just as we were doing a U-turn up the top here, it actually looks like it's locking that rear diff. So that's probably what helped us get up the hill, because the limited slip diff must have an ability to lock itself as required. So yeah, now hill descent control. There is no hill descent control. It is not equipped in our car. So I'm just going to lock this in first gear basically. Okay, so I can't see over the edge there. We don't have a front camera either. So we're just gonna have to creep it over. First gear is selected in low range. So I'm going to ease off the brake there. Yeah, the clearance isn't great. I can feel like we're collecting a lot of the stuff at the front there. And without hill descent control here, I'm basically just having to ride the brake in first. If I let go of the brake there, it runs away a little bit, but yeah, it's okay. I think, look, if you're going to be doing any serious off-roading in this, I would be equipping it with rear differential lock. I'd also be getting hill descent control as well, because outside of that, it is bloody good. So yeah, these American trucks have just performed way better than I thought they would. So yeah, big thumbs up from me. Best-selling ute in Australia, Toyota HiLux. Let's see how it goes here. Two-wheel drive to start with. I've got it on our rollers. We'll just come to a stop here and then roll onto the throttle. I have to find another word. This gets very repetitive after a while. Okay, here we go. So rolling on. It's funny, this is the proving ground that we're at is actually where Toyota does a lot of testing for HiLux. And it kind of shows, because it is now getting off this with very little fuss. Very good. All right, hometown advantage. Okay, four-wheel drive high range is activated. Let's give this one more crack. Come into a stop right about there. Okay, and onto the throttle. You can hear it activating there. Very nice. Wow. That was very impressive. It just did everything it needed to do there. So yeah, very cool. Awesome. All right. off to the mogul. Given how well that just performed in four-wheel drive high range, I'm tipping it's going to do well here as well. So let's start off with our flex test. Drop it into here, just there like that. No problemos, so I'll roll onto the throttle now. Yeah, look, say what you will about the HiLux, its age and whatever else you could think of, but kind of just does what it says on the box. So let's see what happens on the hill. The Rogue has, of course, the wider wheel track, so it is basically using a bigger footprint on the road, different suspension setup with our dampers now outboard of the chassis rails. So it does mean that you're going to get better flexibility for driving on road, but let's see if it actually translates here to off-road driving as well. Look, HiLux is pretty straightforward when it comes to four-wheel drive equipment, so I'm just going to put this in neutral, low range. Once that is active, I'm going to lock the rear diff. Keep in mind the rear diff only locks on this when it is actually in low range, so it doesn't actually work at all in high range. This switches ABS, stability control, traction control off, the whole shebang. So let's give this a shot and see how it goes. HiLux is getting up here fairly easily. A little bit of wheel lock on that. Let's go, let's go. All right, there we go. Boom. Mighty HiLux does it. That is awesome. So it was doing everything that it was meant to do with the gearbox there. It wasn't flaring up or being silly like the Navara did. It just walked up there. I had to stay committed to the throttle, but with the other utes, when I was in the throttle, they would start going backwards or start being silly. And this, on the other hand, just did what it was meant to do. So yeah, pretty impressed with that. And keep in mind, we had to lock front diff on the Ranger Raptor to get up that same hill. So, and the Ranger Raptor was the first one to go up it. So yeah, keep all those things in mind. Okay, hill descent control. I've switched the rear diff lock off. For some reason, hill descent control doesn't work in HiLux with the rear diff locked. It doesn't in a lot of utes, works perfectly fine in the Ranger in every drive mode. So a little disappointing, but that's okay. The 360 camera in this is terrible. I don't even know what I'm looking at there, but that is our descent, so we'll see how that works. I've got my foot off the throttle. I can't control the speeds here using cruise control either, so let's see how it performs. The pace is okay, could be a little slower, but it's okay. I can actually go for the brake a little bit there and it will then slow it down a bit, but I would have liked just out of the box there for the pace to be a little bit slower and then just the ability to control it using cruise control, for example. But look, HiLux, I wasn't expecting it to be this good. It doesn't have some of the whiz-bang stuff that a lot of the new utes have in terms of electronics and gizmos and stuff. It just does what it says it does. So yeah, this is pretty damn good, I reckon. So the trusty Mitsubishi Triton. Now, fun story or fact, there is damage on this car, and it is because a numpty in the city crashed into another car that then crashed into our car. Checked it all over. It's going to be fine for our off-road test, but if we do have any dramas, we're going to call it out that it has something to do with that damage. Thankfully, we tracked the person down and they're now going to need to fix the big mistake they made. So, all right, let's give this a shot. We're in two-wheel drive. I will explain something interesting in just a second, but two-wheel drive, and we'll line it up now and see how it performs on the rollers. Come to a stop just here. Light on the throttle. It's actually pretty good. Roll back ever so slightly, but clambered on out of there without any dramas at all, which is great. So I mentioned the something interesting I wanted to mention is this. So Super Select four-wheel drive, you can actually run this on four-wheel drive high range on sealed surfaces. Unless you're driving like a very small selection of utes, you can't drive most of them on sealed surfaces with four-wheel drive high range. So that is one of the benefits of the Triton. Let's give this a shot now in four-wheel drive high range and just see whether that changes the equation at all. But pretty impressed there with the two-wheel drive setup, and I think they should probably do the same thing. So line that up and then come to a stop just there and light on the throttle. That is awesome. Good job, Mitsubishi. Very nicely done. So just like we did in Raptor, I'm going to leave this in four-wheel drive high range, but not with the center diff locked, because this actually has, in addition to four-wheel drive high range, it has four-wheel drive high range with the locked center diff and four-wheel drive low range with the locked center diff. So let's see how it performs. Firstly, with our flex test. Drop that into that position just there. Cool, all good on the flex test. I'll roll onto the throttle now. It's a bit hesitant, but yeah, there you go. It was hesitant to start with, and then it really just got stuck into it and it moved without any dramas at all. So, on your Mitsubishi. So, big hill time. All right, so we'll pop this into low range, so neutral. Go down here to low range, wait for that to click in. There it is, just there. Now what we'll do is turn the rear diff lock on. There's also some drive modes here, so actually there you go, none of those work while this is in rear diff lock mode. But all of our safety aids are off, so let's give this a shot. This is feeling good, wow. Holy crap, I was not expecting that. What the hell? Mitsubishi, this thing is ancient and it walked up that like it was nothing at all. Wow, and that is from a car that has been absolutely assaulted by an idiot driver. So that is unreal. That is seriously good. I'm shocked by that. So hill descent, we'll pop it on by pressing this button here. So it lights up down the bottom there. I don't have any cameras here that I can activate, but we'll just creep over the edge there. See how quickly it goes down. I guess it probably doesn't matter if I do more damage to it, but we'll see what happens. So here we go. So far so good with speed. Damn, that is good. That is really nicely controlling that descent. Doesn't look like I can control speed using the cruise control switch, but that speed and that descent is absolutely perfect. So, right. Sounds like an ad for a Mitsubishi Triton, but that is damn good. Very impressed with that. V6 Ranger time. So Raptor walked through this without any dramas at all. So let's see how V6 Ranger goes. So keep in mind, you can run this in four-wheel drive automatic if you want, but I've got it in two-wheel drive high range here just to see how it goes with traction control. So rolling on the throttle. Nice, so a little roll back and then it takes off without any problems at all. Nicely done, excellent. Let's give that one more shot, this time in four-wheel drive automatic. Okay, we've got the modes selected. We'll roll on to, oh my God, I've done it again. It was the last car anyway, so we've rolled onto our rollers, there you go. Okay, come to a stop and I will now roll onto the throttle. Same story, slight little drop and then it just powers on without any issues at all. So that is damn impressive. Let's head over to our Mogul. Now I'm expecting this should perform pretty much the same as the Raptor in our Mogul. So certainly the door should open and we should be seeing the same results here on traction control. So we'll drop her in, get her into that little setup just there. Yeah, piece of cake on the door and then I'll roll onto the throttle here. Very nice. Look, in theory, this should perform as well as it does simply because it is the newest Ute here and they've put the most effort into it most recently. So yeah, it's good to see that that all sort of works as intended. Lucky last for our hill as it starts raining again. Ranger, so neutral. I'm going to put this into mud ruts and go into 4 low and then we will lock the rear diff as well. Okay. Wish me luck, because we couldn't get up here in the Raptor with rear diff locked, so let's see what happens with regular Ranger. Oh, come on. Oh, come on, come on, come on. All right, we are getting there. We are getting there. Nice. Nice, good job, okay. Took a little bit of effort, but we got there. It is so weird that the Raptor wouldn't get up there with rear diff locked. So, I don't know, maybe the terrain has changed a little throughout the day, but I would have thought it would be much worse as opposed to much better. So, there you go. Ranger V6 made it up there. Tiny bit of a struggle, but it got up there nevertheless. Hill descent control. We've got our camera running up the front there. I'm going to press this. Hill descent control ready. Ah, that's interesting. So I can't, doesn't look like I can adjust speed here like I could in the Raptor. I don't see any menu appearing there. I do feel it is actually adjusting though with the cruise control. So right now I've got it set to go really slow, but then if I push that up, it speeds up. God, we're catching a lot under the carriage there. So yeah, 200 and over 200 millimeters of ground clearance, but we are still catching a fair bit of stuff under there. But look, that actually did really well, so pretty surprised by that. I would have thought this wouldn't have performed as well as the Raptor did, but I think that the Raptor has better leverage there with the tires and also having a front diff lock as well. It really has better sort of latitude. But I think with this setup here, it has all of the smarts to make this idiot proof, and it means that if you are just a regular person and you want to go driving off-road, you just press a few buttons and it does its thing. But then if you do want to customize all the settings, you can do that as well. So pretty impressed with the V6 diesel here in the Ford Ranger.
Okay, so thank you for watching all of that, or maybe you just skipped ahead to the verdict, potentially, probably, who knows. Before I run through the results, I just wanted to point out a couple of caveats, because I know this is probably stuff that you guys are thinking about, and I just want to make sure that you were aware that we were aware of the stuff you're probably thinking about. First one is the tyres. Each of the dual cab utes had the standard tyres fitted to it that it comes with straight out of the factory. We didn't modify any of that. Same goes for the tyre pressure. We just ran the placard tyre pressures. So that way it was going to be exactly how you would get the car delivered to you. We could have gone down the path of fitting aftermarket tyres to each of these, but really we just wanted to take a car that was representative of what a buyer buys off the showroom floor, and then they go out and do a little bit of off-roading. If you are serious about off-road driving, I would absolutely be changing the tyres to something a bit more suitable, especially with some of the dual cab utes that were running highway terrains. An all-terrain or a mud terrain is going to be a better option if you are predominantly doing off-road driving. And that takes us to the hill and the hill composition. So obviously loose gravel throughout the day, it will have become different to the way that it was at the start of the day. And we were concerned originally that the hill would degrade to the point where the cars later on in the day wouldn't be able to get up, because the earlier cars were kind of digging things up a little bit. But it did show us with the Ford Ranger Raptor, for example, we had to lock the front and rear diffs for that to actually make it up. Whereas the Ford Ranger Wildtrak, which didn't have a front diff lock and was the last car that we tested, actually made it up the top. So the composition of the hill, which you can see on the screen now, from where we started and where we finished, ended up staying pretty much the exact same, which was good news. Now, finally, I'm sure some of you are sitting there going, you could have easily made it up that hill if you just stayed in the throttle and just committed the whole way through. Look, potentially each of the dual cab utes would have made it up to the top, even on highway terrain tyres, if I just flogged the living daylights out of them and just did everything I could to get to the top. But that wasn't going to be representative. So the methodology I took with the dual cab utes was to have the same throttle application all the way up, and then once it did start getting a little stuck, applying more throttle, moving the wheel around a little bit, and then seeing how far we could get. There was no point staying in it and just digging a hole, because it would make it harder for the subsequent utes. So the whole purpose of this was to see how well they would do straight out of the box, and how well you as an average punter would be able to do as well. I think that if you did attack it as hard as you possibly could at double the speed perhaps, you'd probably make it up, but we just wanted to keep it fair between each of the dual cab utes. Okay, so caveats to one side, let's talk about some of the highlights and things that stood out before I go to the best and worst. I've got my iPad here with our video results on there. I thought the BT-50 and the D-Max on the rollers were really interesting. When we have reviewed BT-50 and D-Max before in our light off-road course, we always seem to have issues with the traction control system not really working that well. And the rollers absolutely highlighted that. They were able to slide all the way back to the end of the rollers before the traction control system actually did anything. And it is a little bit troubling when you consider that Isuzu builds the BT-50 and the D-Max as well. They have only two real vehicles that they sell as passenger cars, so the dual cab ute and also the SUV. You would think that they would have traction control sorted, given that they both have quite an off-road focus as well. So that is a little bit disappointing. Hopefully, if some of their engineers are actually watching this video, they go and buy a Triton or something and work backwards from their traction control system and figure out how to make this one a little bit better. I don't love the self-locking rear diffs that the Silverado and the Musso had. The reason is, yes, it is useful because when you do get that slip, they lock and then you're able to get out of that situation. Problem is you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't have any real control over it either. I'd prefer to just have a button that says rear diff lock. I hit that. It does what it says on the box and I'm able to get out of a situation. With this, you never know whether it's coming or going and you just don't have any great certainty in terms of what's happening. The American utes in general, I was pretty surprised at. I didn't think the Ram and the Chevy were going to make it up the hill so easily. Given how big they were both on fairly sort of normal tires. They both powered up there with great ease, which I absolutely love. So it shows you that size does matter when it comes to off-roading. Triton, that surprised us a lot. Triton has been out for such a long time, and it shows you that they really had the four-wheel drive system sorted and also the traction control system sorted. It did such a good job in terms of clambering up the hill and also on our rollers. And for a platform that is so old, I'm hoping that they transfer this over to the next generation of Triton, which is going to be shared with Navara, so that they can take advantage of that traction control system. HiLux, very sort of straightforward and just does what it says on the box. It passed all of our tests without any dramas at all. And I think that just shows you that HiLux, it is the best-selling dual cab ute in Australia. And you can see why so many people buy it, simply because it is incredibly capable. Okay, so best and worst. Let's start off with the worst. Look, I think the GWM was probably the most unimpressive all round. On the rollers, it did a very bad job. It was almost as bad as the BT-50 and the D-Max in terms of being able to progress both in rear-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. That then followed on to the offset Mogul, where it was the only dual cab ute that overheated its all-wheel drive system. So that's pretty unimpressive as well when you consider that these dual cab utes are designed for off-road driving. It should be able to do something as basic as an offset Mogul without overheating the all-wheel drive system. And then of course it didn't get up the hill either, which I think is just representative of all of those systems not really working well together. Now on to our winner. Well, winners, I've actually got three categories of winner here. I have best value, best four-cylinder, and then an overall winner as well. In terms of best value, it went to the Ranger Raptor, so it gives you pretty much all of the thrills that you need without having to spend mega dollars, and you get on-road performance, off-road performance. It's one of the few dual cab utes in the segment that does front and rear diff locks. It really is a well-catered machine that couples with excellent ability off-road and then off-road for anything you kind of throw it at as well. And the winner for the best four-cylinder is the Nissan Navara Pro 4X Warrior. Look, this thing is built for off-road driving and it performed incredibly well on our off-road course. It did well on the offset Mogul, did well on the rollers, and then when we attacked the hill, it really just powered up there without any dramas. There was that little bit to point out with the gearbox kicking down a gear, but I think that's easy to manage simply if you control the gear shifts on your own. And that brings us to the overall winner, and quite easily the best off-road performer here, and that is the Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. I thought the Gladiator was probably a little bit of a poser's car. It had a lot of functions, but ultimately all I had to do was lock the rear diff and it climbed up the gravel hill without any problems. If you did find anything super challenging, you would lock the front diff, disconnect the sway bars, and I feel that this thing would go virtually anywhere. It is quite an impressive machine, and it flows onto Jeep's heritage of being good off-road. And it's funny because the last time we did a light off-road test like this, which was with our medium SUVs, the Jeep was actually the worst, and that was in the Compass. It had terrible body rigidity and it overheated its all-wheel drive system. So maybe that the Compass Trailhawk is more of a poser's Jeep, whereas the Gladiator Rubicon is more of a actual off-road Jeep. So look, I hope you enjoyed our video. We absolutely loved making this. You can see the end results on the screen there and how everybody performed. I think overall everyone did fairly well. There were some fails there, some better than others, but in general, if you do buy a dual cab ute today, most of them are going to be able to do some pretty basic sort of off-road driving. If you're going to be more serious, I'd be having a look at some of the better performers in our test. What do you want us to test next? It may not be an off-road test, but what do you want us to test as part of a mega test, and where do you want us to test it? Let us know in the comments section below. We have shot a stack of other ute content as well, so if you do want to see that, scroll down to the links in the description below. We've done everything from towing to drag races to dyno tests. It is all down there in the link in the description below. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you share it with your mates, and also hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, but until next time, take it easy.